that's a triple play. New episodes, I couldn't wait. Yeah, open your mind at the first gate. Press play, no need to debate. AoA, check me out. Look, clocked in, you can catch the hype. Golden Dawn, how we follow the light. Anime like life, married to it, my wife.
What is going on, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people of all ages? Welcome back to the AoA show. I'm your host, as always, Ian, along with my boys, Isaiah.
Yo, yo, yo.
And Gavin.
What's poppin', beautifuls?
And today we are here to talk about the God of High School episode 7, more of an in-depth, deep analysis, deep dive on the episode as a whole. We did react to the video as well, so if you haven't seen our reaction video to that, I highly suggest that you check that out on the channel. But yeah, there was a lot to, I lied. There's really not a lot to go over this episode in my personal opinion, because it really just centralizes around two key fights or scenes that kind of bounce back and forth. There's really
I'm
not.
line. Can you scoot?
Yeah.
It's here, right?
Sorry.
I'm looking at the camera and I'm looking back at. I'm like, this is not. We are way too close.
My bad. I didn't know. I just saw Jay's face.
He's like, bro, like this
I'm
is
like,
the
why
line in the
does he look
sand.
Oh, sir, you built onto my side. So you don't do that!
No, so we're bouncing between two major scenes in the episode. So this one's called Anima/Force. One thing that I do like is that one of the commenters mentioned last time that they were going to switch up the scenes within the OP. In like not the songs, but the fights and stuff like that, which they did, because we're jumping into like a new arc now, I would say, and looked really cool. I like that a lot. I think this was the first time that we saw a previously on whatever thing, although it was like 2 seconds, because it's like it basically was just like everyone's using Choreography now, done. You know what I mean? It's like trigger OP, but anyway, so we get into the episode and we see that they're Jin and gang or Mori and gang are up against 3 side fodder characters, and that's really all I could refer to them as. And this is one thing for me, I'm going to say, I mean, if you've listened to any of our reviews before, you know that we fuck with the show, but I do have to say this episode in general definitely wasn't one of my favorite ones, which, didn't say it was my favorite one this time. Still episode 5, I think. But, and I think the reason for it is that I think we spent a little too much time, I don't know if you guys would agree with this statement, on the side characters and kind of like fleshing out their exposition just for them to not only lose, but like promptly lose within like a hit after the exposition was laid down. And it almost seemed a little pointless unless, again, we see these characters down the line, and not only do we see them down the line, but they're doing like relevant things in order to further the plot, which, to be honest, I could be wrong here, but like I'm really not seeing it, right?
Yeah.
Like that was one thing that bothered me.
Yeah, it's weird because it feels like the pacing's off, and I think what makes it so relevant, like as a viewer, to know that it's off, because it's like this show it's on like 2 planes right now, where it's like you have the normal fighting scene in the tournament, and then like the extraterrestrial like forces of like spiritual shit that's going on, and it's weird because it has it laid out to the point where we're expecting it to jump into that next like spirit mode, like God like tier level. But right now they're still at like that tournament base. So I feel like as a viewer, I'm like, yo, I just want to skip the fighting tournament shit. Like that's over. Like we already got past that. Let's go to the next step, the spirit shit. We see it in the same show. Like they're going back and forth. And that's what makes it feel off, I think. And I feel like that's why we know they're side fodders. Like we're watching the episode and we're like, yo, we don't even want to watch this tournament shit. We want to go to the spirit stuff, because we know that Mori and gang are going to have to get to that level to fight, because obviously that's like the premise of the show. Like they're the main characters. They're going to have to eventually like hit to like go to that register. So now it's like, I just want to get there, and that's like what's throwing the pacing off for me, because that they're going to have to win the fights to get to the next level that they're supposed to be at. So why are we just like kind of beating around the bush at this point? I feel like they almost shot themselves in the foot by like showing all their cards in the beginning at such an early stage, because now you just want to get there that much faster. But they're like almost cucking themselves, because now we have to wait and then go through like all of these different stages, which obviously you have to for any other like normal show. But like, I don't know. I get kind of annoyed when it's like in the same episode and it's like you have this cool, like crazy shit happening, and you have the lead up to like the main characters that need to eventually hit that point. And it's like, I get it, but I don't know. I kind of just want to be there already.
It's weird because, like, with several other shonen anime that I know, like, when you're talking about, like, the power scaling and how that equates to the characters is usually like a frame of reference you can use to judge like how strong the strongest character in that universe is compared to your protagonist. But like they're always in a bubble, right? So it's like if, like the main protagonist is, you have Mori here who's like a Taekwondo expert, he can fight and all this stuff, but like that his base, for now is kind of like just straight martial arts. Like he doesn't, doesn't have any powers or anything like that. And the strongest person in this world does. You can always trace like theoretically how Mori's going to get from where he is to strongest power. Now, at least, it feels like there's this weird disconnect between the people who have superpowers and the people who don't. And it doesn't like, you don't, at least I don't like know how we're getting there, or I can't like trace any sort of like, logical line to like, okay, they're going to do this, or once they learn, because they don't even know about it. You know what I mean? Like Daoi's the only one who's even like brought it up as like, hey, I think there's like monsters in like this tournament or something. And
pretty good word on it.
Yeah, exactly. And Park was literally like, just shut up, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Which is like, okay, but like I'm kind of worried about it because like how we're gonna get, where does the end game come from? And it's like, again, like you were saying, if you spend so much of this time on the tournament side, like where Mori and stuff is, that's all fine and well. But if there's no stakes in it, it's like almost kind of just eye candy, which is fine if you want to like throw that in the middle of what's going on. But I almost feel like this episode should have been centered on what was going on with like Hugh and the commission and all that stuff, because A, in my opinion, it was much more interesting, and B, like that's clearly where, like you said, that's where the story wants to go, and that's where it has to be. So like to like weirdly linger on the fighting stuff, and again, not that it was bad, but it just like, you just watch our reaction, you'll know, like I felt very like, I know I literally know how this is going to end.
And even like you said, if you want those fights to be eye candy, they didn't even like give them their due diligence. Like it literally was, they gave it some exposition for like 3 or 4 minutes, and you're like, okay, I know you're still going to die. And then literally after that exposition, one hit and they're done. And it's like, bro, are you going to like at least, like the fight was shorter than the expedition that you gave to a character that we already knew wasn't going to last 2 seconds in this fight, which I understand the reasoning behind it. Like you want to try to like raise the emotions to back that other person, and then, like make the fight more enthralling in a way. And yes,
but it almost feels like a disservice to do that if you're then literally going to KO them in the next minute of the fight, right? It's like, why would you even give someone backstory that you're never going to see again?
Yeah. My thing is that, so when we watch a lot of these shonen animes, or just, not all anime, but shonens in particular, there's an air of predictability, right? Like the plot armor is thick for the most part with a lot of these. And it's like, at the end of the day, we know where the story has to go, kind of mirroring what Isaiah was saying, where it's like, okay, Mori has to get to, let's say, Mugen's power level, right? So we know that like inevitably he has to advance through the tournament or whatever the case might be to get there. So like, we know in the back of our minds that like they have to win these fights, they have to do these things in order to progress the plot. But at the same time, it's like, with the audience already knowing that in the back of their mind, I always appreciate it when shows do their best to try and subvert expectations, and like the ride in order to get there isn't predictable. Right? So it was like, for me, once I saw, which by the way, hilarious scene when Mori hits his pressure points wrong.
Oh, that was amazing.
That was funny because like up until for a second I was like, oh, okay, I'm interested. But then once the old one of the guys from the Six was like, okay, like old man Jin's Taekwondo's like, it's out. You know what I mean? This is the new wave. I knew it was gonna fuck up. Like I just knew from there. But then like Mori's just like, shit, I hit the wrong ones, and he gets his ass beat, which was funny. Don't get me wrong, but I think it kind of, for me, it kind of was like, okay, from there, like I already knew 12 steps ahead. Even though like I already knew, but now I really, really knew. It was like there's no way else this ends except for Daoi and Mira to win out, right?
It's
so
a
it was
three-man
like
fight. So if it's best 2 out of 3, and Mori's already out from the start, like
exactly.
And
like
if they do lose by some miracle, you know that it's going to be some like weird backdoor shit.
Which, to be honest, if they did lose, that would have been like maybe interesting because it's like, okay, what is this backdoor, etc. But it was like it was very predictable in the sense that like we knew they had to win. So it felt like, and not only that, but again, how quickly they did win, it just seemed to like almost, quite frankly, a waste of time to go into the backstory of a lot of these characters that were just going to get one-shotted. You know what I mean? Within that time.
Unless they're of some relevancy in the future.
Which again, I couldn't, like I said at the beginning of this episode, I couldn't imagine that they're going to be, you know what I mean? Like, just based off how their character design, not to be a dick, but like, I could be wrong and eat my own words on that one. Y'all could correct me. That's fine without spoiling anything. Fair enough. I was wrong. But like, my gut is really telling me that there's really not much more that they service to the plot. So it almost just seemed like
unless
waste
they
of,
just had
of
more
time.
of a part in the manhwa, so they just wanted to give them
Fair
some sort
enough.
of like justice.
Yeah,
That's the only
yeah.
thing
They
that I
might have
can
had
come
more of
to.
a manhwa thing, you know,
Yeah.
which again I guess makes sense. But it's like if you only have X amount of episodes to flesh out this manhwa, and you have to know by now that a lot of the biggest gripe I would see, especially coming from the YouTube perspective and us talking about it, are that a lot of people that are, that don't like the show don't like it due to the fact that they're manhwa readers first, and that you are completely blasting through this material like hyper speed, which fair enough. You only have X amount of time to use here. But like in lieu of that, you'd think that if they because they only have X amount of time, that they wouldn't devote like roughly 5 to 10 minutes of exposition on a character that gets one-shotted, right? It seems like if you only have this much time to burn, the candle's burning at both ends here. Like I would literally make every single second the most relevant shit I possibly could. That's just my opinion, but I don't want to harp on it too long, but we kind of had to, because this actually plays a major part in the episode, in that half of it is that, right? It's the guy who, by the way, is 38 years old and is in high school. What the actual fuck, dude? Like, what the fuck? Just don't name a guy to high school at that point, dude. Like, what are you doing? Like, there's not
It's
even
one thing if it's
college.
college. That's what I'm saying. It's one thing if
exactly.
it's in college,
Like,
but,
sure,
like-
get your degree a little late, but like, it's like, I'm going to go in at high school. It's like, all right, dude. Like,
Well, like that wouldn't
Whatever.
be as bad if high school itself played some sort of relevancy in the show. Again, when we're talking about stuff that like just probably shouldn't make the cutting board, it's like, what the fuck is the point of like setting in high school? Like you could say they're in high school and like they go to school, during the day, and then after school it's like, the gloves come off and they all go to this tournament. That's fine, because now it's just a part of the setting. But like to have it be such a prominent thing in this show, but like literally not once like reference any, like I haven't seen a single nigga pull out a book, bro. A single, like not one, not one.
Whoa, you had Kakashi with the bat.
A single nigga that's lived more than one episode I have not seen pull out a book. And I'm saying I just have question. Why? What is the point? You could just call this like the god of tigers or whatever the fuck this show is like supposed to be about, or like God. That's a pretty dope name. Like just straight, like you know what I mean?
Yeah,
What is like it? It just feels like it's like, oh yeah, and by the way, make sure like they're in high school. But it's like, but why though? What is the point? What are you doing? What does that do for the story?
I don't know. I completely agree. But and then no, I know. I just can't get over that. Anyway, so again, we're bouncing back and forth, and we kind of, I won't go too ham later when again the female side fodder goes literally through the same exact treatment to get one-shotted essentially by Mira. So we'll briefly brush over that later, but we go also back and forth between them and Q, who was essentially ambushed by part of Nox, which is the cult group as far as we could surmise, and they send out assassins now to deal with Mugen, the Six, I guess, and
The commissioners,
anyone associated with this tournament in any way, shape, or form for whatever reasons they might have. So we have the guy that's there, who we thought killed Q in the last episode. I genuinely thought he was.
Well, I think they even said like Q's dead or something.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
that's what I thought.
They really tried to sell you on the
well,
fact
that was
he
the
died.
weird thing, because that's the thing that they spoiled in their
had a
exclusive
feeling,
clip
yeah.
is that he was alive. Like the spoiler clip was that fight.
Yeah.
And like I was watching and I'm like, why the fuck would you put this up? Like
Yeah,
now
yeah,
all
it
that
seems-
suspense
Now,
is taken out
I'm
of the
not crazy.
episode.
Didn't they say like Q is dead with the other guy? Like, am I going
Well,
crazy?
again,
They didn't like say the words Q is dead, but it was heavily implied
Yeah,
that
that
like
he was dead.
they were like, oh, it killed the who the big nose guy.
Yeah.
Whatever
Yeah, yeah.
And then it cuts to Q who's like bloody on, and you're like,
Oh, is that what happened?
You're like,
he's got to be dead.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And to be fair, also, I didn't say anything during the reaction, but in the OP, you actually see Q fighting with the scythe.
Yeah.
And so from there, I didn't say anything to you because I didn't think that
didn't
you
notice,
saw it.
yeah.
And I had a feeling the scene you were talking about was going to be that, because once I saw it in the thing, I was like, wait a minute, he's fighting with the scythe. And like, it could have been interpreted different because he himself never fought with it. It was really the jester, but I'm like, who the hell else is going to use this weapon?
Yeah.
So I just let it ride, and he was alive there. But last episode genuinely thought he was dead,
That's
so
what they wanted you to think.
yeah. So he's back, and one thing I've learned now from this show, if anything, is that stab wounds in particular don't mean a damn thing.
Fatal wounds really don't mean a damn thing, because
Don't
niggas
mean-
get their arms cut off, niggas get shanked like
Yeah.
on a daily basis, and they're
Don't
like, all
mean
right,
a
let me
damn
just
thing.
brush this off, and it's like, dude, your arms are missing. What do you
Don't
mean?
mean a damn thing. And it's like, okay, maybe they'll go into some sort of explanation as to like, Cheriok, besides being able to summon a pseudo stand, is like, okay, enhances your body, to some sort of like toughness, whatever. I would appreciate some sort of explanation on that personally. Fair enough.
I think
because
they're
it's
waiting until like
regardless of what
They're waiting until like Maury gets his head cut off, and then they're like, actually, Chariot can basically repair any injury ever.
Yeah,
it's like,
because it was like they kind of explained when
convenient.
Maury got his neck snapped in like episode 1 or 2 or whatever, and then like they had the thing on his neck and it recovered. And at first we were like, what the hell? But now it's just like it's even.
Yeah,
better.
I mean,
what's the point in having
this
that
show
anymore? You
has
just have a
always
Chariot,
seemed
you're
more
fine.
interested in the fighting and not how niggas recover after the fight, like from examples like that.
Facts.
But like, it's just one thing to get like your neck snapped, which is like, all right, your body is still, but it's like if your arms are clean cut off from the shoulders, and it's like, this is nothing. It's like, that's not nothing. No, your arms are missing.
And at least they explained it with the one assassin who he's like, okay, this is my ability to
Yeah,
like,
he's got, like,
go like
strings
puppet
or-
mode thing,
whatever.
So it was like fair enough. But then like later in the fight when the angel dude literally just gets like, blah, just gets stabbed right in like what seemed to be the chest heart area. And he just like didn't even phase, wasn't even phased by it later. It was like, oh, okay.
crazy,
And like, I have to say this today does seem like kind of a little bit more of a bash fest. So I apologize for anyone that's coming in, as a newcomer on this episode, watch our old ones. Like, we definitely,
Although I don't know why this is the first
show.
one you watched.
No. Yeah, fair enough.
Watch the other ones.
The show definitely, we give it enough praise. So this one definitely was like a little bit off, but I hope one thing that, and I say I hope, and they've already kind of answered my question, but like one thing that kind of disenfranchised me with something like a series like Baki, the grappler per se, at least the Netflix iteration of it, of more recent, was this kind of thing exactly where it was like these fighters would be kind of like jazzed up. Number one, that it's like, okay, they have to do this, but in service of the plot, you knew that they had to lose. Now it was interesting when you saw certain characters fight that you didn't know genuinely which one could make it on top to service the plot. Like, for instance, I think, again, at the end of the episode when the blue-haired guy fought the one disciple, I was like, okay, based off plot, I knew that blue-haired guy was, like, way too jazzed up to lose this fight.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So it was like, again, but if it was like, that other guy who got beat by the blue-haired guy and someone, like, else totally random, like that I would actually weirdly appreciate in a sense, because it was like I genuinely didn't know who was going to win this fight. It could go either way, so it kind of like strips the air of predictability from it. But again, kind of like similar vibes to Baki in that, right, where like a lot of the fights I enjoyed were actually those where it wasn't the main characters
or the
and stuff.
stakes in the fight make sense. Like, I mean, we've said this before, but like all the greatest anime fights have like realistic stakes behind them, where it's like, oh, I know that in this fight, based off of like how the human anatomy works, you know what I mean? This guy has this limit and this guy has this limit. So watching them fight against those limits is what makes the fight entertaining. But it's like, if you ring the bell to start the match and this nigga pulls out a shark and just eats you, it's like, where is the bait? Where are we even starting here? Like, this isn't even a fight. He's just like, what is happening right now?
Well, so my thing is too, to finish my point with the Baki reference there, was not only what I just said previously, but also what kind of drove me nuts with that series was that these characters, like even if you take a fight like that and we could draw a direct parallel to when this dude gets munched up by a shark, it'd be like someone would literally like it almost seemed like they go above and beyond to show how like gruesome of a, I'm going to say, quote, death, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which why I quote that is because they never actually died, that this person suffered, right? So like in Baki, like some dude gets a grenade slapped in his face and then lives, you know what I mean? Or like, in this episode we have the shark iteration as an example. And like, that's one thing personally that kind of drives me nuts with these, because it's like, you're like, at first, because I didn't know, the dude got munched up by the shark. I was like, holy shit. You see him in the reaction. I was like, oh my God. Like, that was brutal. He's dead. But then it was like 2 seconds later, he's like standing and he has like one puncture wound. And it was like, bro, that to me, that just like, that bothers me, because now it's like, I don't know where we go from here. Like in terms of like who's living, who's not. And it's like, are you just keeping these people because they have to serve, like they have to do some side fodder shit later or whatever. And it's like,
or it's like, you don't know who, like the stakes are taken out of it for me.
Yeah,
it's like, I don't,
exactly.
I see that now and I'm like, all right, whatever.
Exactly.
Because to me, I'm like, all right, I know that's not like
Exactly.
And I think that's where the high school stipulation comes in, because like they're not going to let high school kids just die in this tournament,
I
so
guess,
it's like that's where
he
feel
did
like
at the end of the episode. He got straight eaten.
Well,
it literally ended on him getting chewed up.
So here's
but I mean, he already got chewed up in the beginning though. So that's
See,
what
we don't know.
Like,
you
don't know. But I mean, it's a tournament of high school kids. They're not going to let them die.
And 38-year-olds.
And 38-year-olds. And that for me is like what. Like with the whole stake thing, where you know that because it's in high school, they can't.
I guess it just bothers me that like I'm gonna call it like a fighter anime, right? Because like that's one thing that I do have to credit this episode for. which I was going to get into, was, and even when these characters are have such little screen time, one thing that I do have to say is that the powers that they have are pretty interesting, and it's cool to see that display a bit. It's short. It's cool to see like the different abilities that people have. It was cool to see Q use the cards and throw them now, and then the things would come out of them.
Dope, yeah.
And it almost seems that like he can teleport his jester because he goes behind the angel. That was cool to see some of those that shit fleshed out. So even if these characters bite the dust pretty quick, it's like, oh, that was a dope ability. Like I could see that being pretty interesting. So respect there. But I think for like a fighter anime at heart, right, that it's like, I don't think you should be really afraid to you know what I mean, to like hit hard. Like you should, I don't think you should be like pulling punches. Like if you're going to show that, okay, this dude with the shark is like clearly ruthless and he's clearly crazy, it's like, kill that guy. You know what I mean? Because like if he's not going to be, you know, and I can eat my own words if that guy has a real relevancy to the plot. When I mean real relevancy, it's like I need to see him in like almost a full episode relevancy. You know what I mean? Because it's like if he doesn't serve that, you know what I mean? Like, why are we keeping him alive at this point? Because to me, it's like, again, you're removing the stakes from the episode where it's like, now I see some gruesome, gory shit happen and you fooled me the first time, you know, shame on you, you know, fool me again. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you're not going to like,
the thing that Gavin was saying where it's like, oh, well, it's in high school. You've got to, it's like, then don't go there. Don't put like deaths in this thing. Don't go to the 11 out of 10 if it doesn't mean anything. If there are no stakes in it, then like you could stick at a 4 out of 10 and I would still believe it or be just as satisfied because I know like that's intentional. You're supposed to be there and all the things that are happening make sense.
I really feel like they're taking the manhwa fights and they're kind of spark noting it and making it faster.
I'm curious for anybody who's read the manhwa, how pacing is like from here up, you know, going forward. Because this episode in particular definitely feels like, all right, we like, you know, we have to start this thing, but we didn't know how to start it. So we just threw like, you know, 3 different things at the board at once. And this is what we got.
And we always knew, you know, coming in because we have all the people that comment that it's like, there's expedited version, you know, the anime is an expedited version of the manhwa. And it was like, you take it in stride, right? Because it's like, okay, you appreciate it for what it's trying to do.
Exactly.
But I just think this episode in particular, and this is one thing that just scares me with this show in that it's not strictly martial arts anymore. It's like the power scaling just boom, it just spiked. That's one thing that kind of scares me. It's that like if you're going to do that, I feel that all the characters that aren't up to that snuff like don't even deserve to be in the show, quite frankly. Like, and I mean that particularly with side characters. You know what I mean? It's like that's fine. You can show them
if you don't know their name, like what is, you know what I mean? You like, it's how names come first. You meet somebody, you get their name, then you can whoop their ass or they can whoop your ass. But it's like, until I even know who this character is, literally, how it can't be invested.
And you could use the argument, it's like, okay, well, it said their name on the thing when it said verses or whatever. But I'm talking like,
yeah, how long did it take us to get fucking Mori and Dawi and like their names down and their main fucking characters?
And like I would assume like what, you know, that I would agree by like name. It's not just like, oh, we know we could read your name. It's like we want to know your name. You know what I mean? Like your name should have relevance.
If your name, if that's the only time it's mentioned in the board, if characters don't, you know what I mean? Like that's not. That's like putting your name in the credits. The fuck does that mean? Like, no, I need if characters don't say your name in the story, it makes it feel like the character doesn't have agency or relevancy in said story.
They're not individual. They're not an individual. Yeah, no, I totally agree. So it was very interesting and like kind of you know, concerning to me to see where the show goes. And it's like I have to think too, being that we just came off the cuff last episode of explaining how the show's going to go now. Like they couldn't go like it's not like they could just throw the 6 in there and like go through this like crazy, you know. So it makes like, again, I knew predictability wise like where the story has to go, and I knew this episode who was going to, for the most part, at least in the tournament setting, who was going to lose and why they had to lose. So like that I get. You can't just like lay out all your cards. Like we have to have these episodes in order to make the later episodes with the stronger opponents a little more, you know, like tasteful. That I understand. But it was like in the interim getting there, it was like, I think could have been executed a little bit better, you know, on my end. But one thing I did say before though, like aesthetically, you know, gorgeous, I have to say. Like a lot of the fights, especially Q and Gang versus the Nox group, that fight in particular was really sweet. Like just showing this display of skills. the one commissioner just can summon a dragon because fuck it. I was like, wow, okay. I thought it was like the stand abilities or whatever the fuck, chariot abilities, like whatever they were like, the jester, for instance, is like roughly like he's a little bigger, like the samurai in the wedding scene, right? Where it was like, okay, you like hit the roof.
Yeah, you think
but
they
I was
can
like,
fit in the room that there's somebody in?
like,
This bitch
whoa.
was wrapped around the building. And they're just like, oh shit.
Well, in a way, it's like a weird, perfect analogy for the show where it's like at any moment, this show will just jump balls to the wall to 12 out of 10 and give you no warning or no setup. So you're like, oh, I didn't know we can go there now. And it's like, what does that mean? And it's like, we'll tell you later. And it's like, but I need to know now. What do you mean later? Like, there's a dragon on that building. How did it get? What is the point? Like, it's like, you just get fucking like culture shocked out of nowhere.
So I'm hoping that like in future episodes, it almost does this thing where like it plays catch up with itself, and like maybe there's a better way to describe what I'm trying to say right now, but like when we get to the fights that are relevant and there are actual stakes on the line, you know what I mean? They're able to execute those flawlessly. So it's like, okay, I'm still going to be pissed at these previous episodes that like didn't like the journey to get there was like, okay, guys, like didn't seem to put much effort into like plot here. But like once we get there, I'm hoping that like they really capitalize on that, right? And like, okay, these are where it's like, I really don't know what's going to happen. You know what I mean? So like, let's make sure that this is insane. Like I need to see like some crazy shit happen where it's like, I don't know, it could go either way because the road to get there was pretty fucking predictable.
Well, we're definitely going to see crazy shit. I think that's
For
like
sure.
that's in itself.
Yeah,
but.
I think it's for me, and I guess in a shonen fighter anime like this, it's not as enticing. But like I'm gonna need like a lot of exposition in the next. Like I need to know
on the characters that are relevant.
on the characters that are relevant, but not even the characters so much as like the world and like this power scaling and how any of this shit works. Because that's again what bothered me. I think the most actually is that like. We'd be, watching Mori and gang, do their fightings in the tournament and whatever, and then we'd jump to like Q and stuff. But it's like, as dope as that fighting looked, again, that's all it ended up being to me was eye candy because like I don't know what these guys are doing. I don't know what any of their limits are. I don't know what the stipulations for any of these powers are. If like I don't know anything, and so there's a lot that like to me, I walk out and I'm like, all right, that was dope, but I couldn't tell you like who was doing what or like what that meant to do. You know what I mean? So it's like again, like to reference just off the top of my head, like. You have your sort of your father shown in like your Dragon Ball Z's and your Naruto's and stuff that take the time to establish power scaling. And it's like, when Naruto reaches his Kyuubi state, it's not like out of nowhere. You know where the fuck that came from. You know what that power was. You've seen it like worked up through the whole course of the show. This is the first time we see these things is like just out of fucking nowhere and they get no explanation. And it's like, I know they only have 12 or 13 episodes, but I think that's why, at least to me, exposition is all that much more important because it's like if I don't know what's going on, like I stop caring.
Yeah, I think again, like I've said it before, but if you only have X amount of time, making sure that every second of that time is allotted to making sure that the audience understands why we're in the world we're in and how this progresses, and making sure that the characters that we're showing and the characters that we're taking time to flesh out are actually relevant to the plot. You know what I mean? I think those are two things that you have to prioritize when you're giving an expedited version, like incredibly hyperspeed expedited version of this story, right? Because like, again, if that's one of your biggest complaints among fan base, which I would assume it is, you know what I mean? Like you'd want to make sure that you're using every freaking second of that time that you have, like that precious time at your disposal to make sure that you're putting forward everything that needs to be said. And again, in this episode, I just feel like there were some things put forward that didn't need to be said, right? I think some of the more, not crazier, but like some of the more interesting parts were like the 10-second dialogue where they're like, yeah, we found, why is his name evaded? Taijin? We found Taijin's arm, like at the fight, and you're like, oh shit.
But again,
right?
it's like we found Taijin's arm. Cut to next scene and never talk. It's like, wait, hold on.
That's what I'm saying.
What
like,
happened to him? Where did he go? Why did he lose an arm? Like
exactly. Like I think that if we swapped like 38-year-old dude works construction and then gets killed in one hand, I think if we swap that whole exposition with like what's going on with Taijin, which I'm sure they'll flesh out, but it's like again, I'm sure that there's a big thing going on there, which in the manhwa they probably really flesh out, so they're not going to be able to flesh it out as much. Like why not take that a little bit more time? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like if possible, or the traitor. Right, you know what I mean? Like the fact that there's going to be a traitor within the midst of the six and the tournament,
and that's what makes it interesting because it's obvious that they show you a little snippet because they want to, prelude it to a next episode. They want to like keep you strung along, and you get that. But it's like when you have a show like this, which already has to expedite shit, you really shouldn't have to string people along if you have that much material to burn through, if that makes sense. Like, why are you holding out, showing us this stuff to get to the next episode? Because it's like, okay, this might be important to the plot. Like, you know, we want you to have this on the back of your mind so you can see to the next thing. But it's like, dude, if you have like 400 chapters to burn through or however long, like, you have the material, you don't really need to wait. Like, you should be able to add in more stuff along with like the important shit that you're talking, like trim the fat a little bit and like just keep it going and moving forward.
Right.
And you should have enough material to keep it moving
like,
forward.
and for reference, Tower of God, which I believe it's 78 or 79 chapters that like from the manga that they condense into the 13 of the anime.
Yeah.
I don't know what the chapter ratio is for God of High School, but it's like Tower of God is clearly a story that is so much more narratively driven, right? So it's like there are plot points, there are character moments that like you have to get right and you have to interpret into the anime in a very specific way.
Yeah.
This anime, and by sequence, I guess this series doesn't feel that narratively focused. So I'm concerned going forward that like the producers of this aren't really going to be concerned going forward. Like story is going to take a back seat to the action or to, you know, all these dope moments. Because like this show, if you just showed somebody like clips and trailers, like it would look like a comedy. Right? It wouldn't like I wouldn't even think that it's a straight up shonen fighting anime unless like you showed me a lot of the fights. But like that's my point is that the marketing here seems to be more of like look how crazy and wacky this show is instead of like whatever the fuck the story is that's going on here. And if that's not given priority, then like I feel like it's just going to end up getting, you know, the gap is going to end up getting worse.
Yeah. I just feel that we've already seen where their priorities lie, and I think that this episode was like very indicative of that. I just have to say that I really hope that when we do get to the plot points that like absolutely need to be fleshed out, like absolutely, right? Because it's like, okay, this is literally like the climax of the season or whatever, those fights, etc. Like those are the ones that I really hope that they took the time to flesh out enough for an audience to understand what we're doing here, why we're doing it, how we're doing it. You know, like all of those things to me need to be answered in the most efficient and, you know, plain way possible so that like as not being a Monroe reader, I am fully up to speed with why the hell this is happening.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Because it's like, then I'm going to look back on these older episodes where you took 10 minutes to describe to people who got one-shotted and I'm going to be a little salty, right? Because it's like, okay, bro, it's not like you didn't have the time. I know you're in a rush, but like you're not going to tell me that you didn't have the time, right? You know, like that's my thing. It's like I already see where they're going with like the not incredibly important stuff, you know, i.e. some of these side fights and things like that. Fair enough. You know, we're kind of shelving that in favor of aesthetically pleasing fights. Fair enough, you know, because the fights look great. You're doing great in that department. That's fine. But as long as like we get to where, you know, to the destination and like when we get to that destination and we're in that moment, you know, like I understand why we're in that moment and how we're going to, you know, navigate it. That's my biggest thing, you know? So I'm hoping that they can deliver on those key moments, which I think they will. I do genuinely think they will. Yeah. But I mean, you know, that's kind of my,
it's just more doing it like curating it to people who haven't read the manhwa so that they can understand it, you know, because we're lucky enough to where we have you guys to explain stuff and we ask you to help us and, you know, and it's like anything, like you don't spoil it too much, but you know, you guys give us a lot of information that helps our experience with coming out of it and looking at things in a different light. However, not everybody has that luxury, you know, not every single person who's going to watch this show is going to look up, you know, analysis or is going to go on YouTube or even watch this channel or whatever. Like, You can't, like, it may seem like we're bashing it a lot, but it's really our critiques for the matter of fact that we haven't read it, and this is our viewpoint from this, you know, specific avenue or an outlet that we're watching it from, and this is our take on it, not knowing any information besides what we see and what you guys give us. So, you know, we know that people who have read it, if, you know, they might not like this episode because we bash it or whatever, like, it's not that we're saying that the material's bad by any means in terms of manhwa or even the show. It's just that you need to kind of look at it in our shoes, how we don't know any reference material. We're going off of what we're being shown. And if we can analyze it and tell that it's missing stuff and, you know, they're rushing things and stuff like that, it is something that needs to be said moving forward, and obviously something that they need to think about when they're making it in terms of, you know, viewer discretion and what are they getting from it, and are we giving the viewers enough information to get our point across and what we want to show, and they need to know what their intentions is of why they're making the show and what they want to put forward. So it's just something we're gonna have to keep an eye on moving, like just watching it.
Yeah,
and see what
I mean,
happens.
for anyone who's been a long-standing fan of the show,
Mm-hmm.
you know, from the inception of it, one thing that we always made sure that we were abundantly clear on was the fact that we will give you an honest opinion on what we're watching or reviewing or talking about, and even to the detriment sometimes of, you know what I mean, because we know the anime community is very, very, you know, like very passionate about the things that they like or that they dislike. But that's one thing that we try and strive for coming forward, is that we're giving you a completely unfiltered, honest opinion on where we think something is in our own minds and offering different opinions on it. So I think, you know, Gavin put it very well. I really couldn't put it any better. But Isaiah, do you have any final thoughts before we...
I mean, not really. I guess, you know, going forward, echoing some of the stuff that Gavin was saying, you know, we'll have to see. I personally am not as... I don't want to say not as hopeful, but I'm very like in the 50. I'm on the middle line here. You know, I what is it like? Expect the best, prepare for the worst. Like in my mind, I'm already prepared that like this could get worse. But I hope, because it's like, you know, I don't mean to keep comparing this to Tower of God, because they're two different shows. But it's like I want this show to do well. I wanted Tower of God to do well, and I think it did do pretty well. And I want, because I like this idea. I like the idea of adapting anime from like not traditional, you know, Japanese, you know, productions or you know, source material. But like in order to do that, like you have to do it right. You have to sell this stuff. And my fear with this is that they are quite literally trying to sell the show instead of like sell God of High School, right?
Yeah.
Sell whatever that story is. Again, some of the dopest fights I've seen in anime all have impact behind them and a purpose. And this could very easily drift into like just fights for the sake of fighting.
Yeah, well put. I will say though, before we sign off, I loved the one chick who had the cross with a laser in it.
Oh, dude, that was man. And then when the fucking like little whack-a-moles popped out and started
little
shooting
teddy
lasers
bears.
at their mouth,
That was like
all right,
awesome. It's like this like
amazing.
clearly has like a religious connotation, this cult, right? So it's like I would assume that a good amount of the members have like something that ties back to some sort of religious semblance, right? Like the one guy's angel wings and then like a sword. You know what I mean? Like he's a guardian angel or whatever, and the one chick had the cross or whatever. But it was funny because I was like telling the guys, I'm like, well, it is 2020. Like it makes sense that it's like you're just shooting lasers out of your cross now. I don't know. I just thought that was a cool thing. But anyway, you know, hoping for the best with some of these new episodes that are going to come out. I am excited to see where the show goes, and hopefully it's able to deliver. I mean, thus far up until this episode, I would say it's really been a treat to watch.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping going forward that, you know, this is just a bump in the road and that they could really deliver on everything in the future, which I fully expect that they will personally. Yeah. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching today. Make sure if you guys like the content, you're liking, subscribing, hitting that notification bell, hitting us up on the socials so you can participate in polls, see everything that you know, the show's doing, what we're doing in our personal lives, keep up to date with everything. Hit us up on Patreon. That's patreon.com/AoA show. And you can find all these links in the description down below. And if you're listening on audio only right now, first of all, we love you. I feel like we don't give enough love sometimes because they can't see us.
That is
you know what I
true.
mean? Check us out on YouTube. If you are on audio only, it adds a whole new perspective to it. But if you didn't know we had audio only and you want to listen on your car ride home or anything like that, we do have the audio only versions on all of your favorite podcast platforms. I promise. You look it up, it's like 99% it's going to be there. So make sure you guys are following us there as well. But until next time, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with us. We'll catch you on the flip. Peace.
Later.
Peace.